Imagine waiting 2 weeks to know if you got a like or not, or a thumbs up. In the decades before the internet, people made comics, and we reached out to each other. What was it like? This is the Sequential Artists Workshop, and these are the 90s mini comics oral history archives. Come join us as we take a longer look at those analog days when communication was a lot slower, maybe more deliberate, maybe more reckless. Who knows? It was just different. Join us as we take a look and really notice how much things have changed. Come join us on the socials. Sometimes it's Comics Workshop, sometimes it's Saw Comics. Either way, come check us out and welcome. Enjoy this interview with Tom Motley, who treated us to page by page going over an issue of the Fandom House catalog from, I think, the early 90s, and showing us so many of the things that were available in the catalog, giving us stories, giving us context, and finding a few really interesting cultural threads in there too. I'm really happy Tom could come on and share with us. Tom is a kind soul and a really interesting creative thinker, someone who's going to be experimenting and looking for how the medium works, but also celebrating the stranger, more marginal ways in which people have made it work, the stranger and more marginal creators. And it's great to have him as our guide through this walk through 80s and 90s mini comics. Enjoy. Okay. Welcome. Okay, Tom Motley. Hello. I'm so glad. Oh, I'm so glad to do this. We're just going to dive in. Let's just dive in. It's Earthquake Day, 2024, right? Okay. So the first question is, say your name, the date, and where you're recording from, and tell us some of the publications that you created in the pre-internet era.
Okay, I'm Tom Motley. I am speaking to you from Brooklyn, New York on it was April 5th, 2024. And I started making comics in the 1980s in Denver. I lived in Denver I grew up there and went to college in St. Louis, and then lived in Denver from graduation in 81 through 2007. And so my thing and I'll show some examples, was to gather together other cartoonists. We formed a group, an anthology that we called Acme Comics, and then spun off from there. My only long form solo comic was called Steel Pulse Pro Wrestling Adventures, 80s and 90s. And then I went from there I formed another group to work on comic strips after that, called Hector. And we did Hector strips, mailing photocopies around to little zine publishers all over the world, getting them placed in sometimes poetry journals and things like that. And then throughout that, I've been making mini comics, and still make them. So I'll show examples on the table as I tell my story.
Awesome. So wait, are you saying you got Hector reviewed in poetry journals and places, or you got parts of the comics excerpted into poetry journals?
Okay. So yeah, they were comic strips that we worked on as a group and in taking turns and stuff. And I was in charge of submitting work, uh, mailing out photocopies to publishers. And so Hector appeared in some weekly papers and some, poetry journals and literary zines and various things all over the world. And I decided, after making a long form comic, that short form was for me. And so I boiled it way down to comic strips and experimental ones, constrained jams and things like that.
Was was Hector produced locally, or was that through the mail as well?
Locally, yeah, we had meetings and stuff, but though we did collaborate with people. Should I show you?
Sure. I'll spotlight if you're going to.
Yeah, spotlight the table, then we can backtrack. Because I have a bunch of stuff set out here. So let's see here. Here, for instance, is a little booklet we made of the Hector strips to send out to people and publishers with our mailing address and stuff like that. So you can see this one's a jam, your a Hector scope. Each of the players was challenged to come up with a logo and a disease, starting with cancer for a
Oh.
horoscope. And then, here's one, Scott Johnson doing his feelings. He was more of a regular cartoonist. Hector was like artists and poets and cartoonists and stuff like that. And then, so here's Brian Comer, who's a fine artist, and Harry Lyrico, who I want to talk about, who's a homeless cartoonist hanging around the Denver area. Melissa Stander, Lori Murphy. Lori's one of the major gadflies on the Denver art scene, even now. And like that. So that's Hector. Here's like a booklet that was made by publisher Ivan Suvanjev, collecting Hector strips for his. He had this magazine called The New Censorship, and he devoted a couple issues just to us. So
the New Censorship was also produced out of Denver?
Yeah, it was Denver-based. Yeah, the publisher Ivan Suvanjev. And here's an example of when we broke the hardback barrier. This is like a collection of sci-fi short stories out of Denver. Like, here's an Edward Bryant story, for example. And then at the back, just little some art and find it. Yeah, and a section on Hector strips. And so you can see different, the artists would share the masthead and then sometimes collaborate on jam strips.
Wow. So a different, the same title, but the strip could be anything by
That's right.
In the collective. Did you call it yourselves a collective, or?
Yes, we did.
Uh-huh.
Yes, we did. So,
and do you want to tell us real quick about what steel pole wrestling, what the thing you did before Hector was?
yeah, should I just go back to the beginning and find my way to that? Is that okay?
Sure.
Because that grew out of the Acme group.
Oh, yeah, start. Yeah.
Okay, so let me just start at the beginning. I was in college in Washington University in St. Louis, and it was in my senior year. I chanced to meet Matt Fizel, who was working at the local record store and selling his mini comics from there. His Cynical Man mini comics, and that was my first encounter with the mini comic format, and also just opened my mind to the possibilities of what you can do with stick figures, boiling down the work and simplify it. So that was a big influence on me.
And sorry, where did that happen? Because I was messing with my cat.
St. Louis.
St. Louis.
Yeah, 1980.
1980.
Man number 14 and 15 cents. You could have it in St. Louis, Missouri. And, Fizel is still going strong. There's some more recent ones. But he's great. He's a huge influence. Important cartoonist, which is part of what I wanted. That's my agenda for today, is use my story to segue into talking about important cartoonists.
Awesome. Go ahead.
So I got out of college and moved back to Denver to my parents' basement. And my first, inaugurating my career, my first thing that I did was to start hooking up with other comic artist wannabes, comic fans. And I did that by joining this fellow Dan Morris was publishing a little zine called Fantasia, little comic fanzine. So here's when I went on to do a cover for them for starring ElfQuest characters. But it's just articles like that. This is by that's a drawing by Kevin Robinette, who passed away not too long ago. Everybody's starting to die off a little bit. So that's, I met these guys, and also through them met this guy, Bob Conway.
Hmm.
He's a cartoonist, and this is one that he did. It was published by Fantasy Press, which was a little press coming out of Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Mhm.
No, I'm sorry. Fantasy Press was Bob. Sorry about that. But he was connected to these guys. The Everyman Comics was the Colorado Springs group, and so
Hmm.
here's a zine they did called Cascade Comics Monthly. So run by the cartoonist Artie Romero, very nice fellow. And so this is like here we see an interview with Jake Kinney,
Hmm.
miscellaneous comics. These guys were really good. They're a little older, and but Bob was connected with these guys, but he was in Denver, and he worked at a printing company, running a press, and so he started doing his own um, fantasy press comics, and that included things like let's see here. Here's one by the Canadian cartoonist Jacques Boivin.
Hmm.
This is how I would say it. Here's some by some of the friends that I would go on to make Acme with, like Richard Florence and Norm Dwyer. And this is a pretty famous, popular one by Harry Lyrico, who I mentioned was homeless, and this is one of his major things. This was included in the in Michael Dower's anthology that he did of many many comics of the 80s.
Yeah.
This was a pretty influential comic, and it was well reviewed in the Comics Journal and stuff like that. And maybe also talking about influences, very important to me is this is a comic by Steve Willis, and I
Yeah.
don't know. Are you familiar with Steve Willis much?
I am. If we've corresponded, it's only been once, but certainly, and we're hoping to get him on here.
Yeah, get him on. He would be great because okay, Willis, he was part of the crew of cartoonists that came out of Evergreen College. So he was classmates with Matt
Oh,
Groening and Linda Barry and Charles Burns, and I guess they had quite a thriving cartooning scene.
I had no idea. I knew about the other three, but I didn't know Willis was part of that.
Right, and to me, this is my issue. I love those guys, but Willis is my favorite. He's the unknown one, and this is a there's this like hidden history of comics going on that's like not that well known. That would include Willis. The thing about Willis is, I guess part of why he's so obscure is that he refused to take money for his work, and for many years now, he's been doing these hand-drawn Morty comics, he calls them. So here we see, here's a number 2161, here's number 4147. I think I saw one go by recently, it was in the 5000s. He numbers them, he draws them on whatever scraps of paper. These are original drawings, they're not printed. And then he does things like, tuck one into the back of the urinal at the restaurant bar or whatever. I've seen on his blog where he would random, throw a dartboard at a map of America and then find some random address in the phone book and mail them a comic. And he's spreads these things around. And
Wow.
and over the years, his stuff has been. He's also doing comics. They've been collected by, mostly from Starhead. Michael Dowers has been his main publisher, but they're wonderful. They're just amazing. And so he was a huge part of the scene. And here's Buzz Bazizik has been collecting, getting people to send photocopies of their Marty comics they've
Oh,
collected.
wow.
He's been gathering them up. So Willis, very important figure. So that was Bob Conway's Fantasy Press, and it was also the Fantasian guys were also doing these comic book conventions in town. And so one year I helped out a little. One year brought Gil Kane to town, and another year it was Michael Kaluta and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And this was actually the first time I ever attempted to teach. Was doing a little instruction at one of these workshops. And I've heard from people who were inspired, who attended and went on to make comics.
Amazing.
I think Charlie LaGreca told me that he was one of the kids in the audience.
What year was that?
This would have been, it's probably this convention, so we can check the year. Is there a year that I can find? 1983.
Mm. Wow.
Right. And so it was hanging out with those guys. We were at dinner, and I broached the subject of how about let's all just get together and make a comic of our own. And I think it was Kevin Robinette who was like, "Are you crazy? that's like the dumbest idea ever," But I wouldn't let it go, and so I started gathering people on the down low, and we would meet at my friend Joel Millsop's basement and jam. And then finally, when it became clear that we were really, as the artists who were contributing to Fantasia, and we were really going to do our own comic, then finally the other principal guys got involved and helped out, and particularly Dennis Pimple, who was he was a writer primarily. He was writing articles for Fantasia, and he was also a good organizer, and he had a head for business. And so he sort of took over. So over the years, through the 80s, we had monthly meetings at Dennis's kitchen. It's not Dennis' kitchen, but Dennis's kitchen.
Yeah.
And, hang out. We do group critiques and stuff like that, and jam together and make our Acme comics. So this is one with a cover by Phil Norman, who's still doing great work. And he was one of the guys who was, connected with Everyman, and he's one of the older guys, and one of the people who thought we were crazy, but ended up joining the team. And so so we did those two. We put out about 10 issues from about 1982 or 3 to 1995 or so. Let's see.
Where would you distribute those?
I think, at first it was like going around to the comic shops and trying to get them placed and stuff like that. And, I think by the end we were getting distributed through Capital City. We got a little more slick. Here's number 8. We were all jamming on making fake comic book covers and putting them in there. And here's number 9 it's Brian Comer again, one of the Hector members who did the cover of this one. And then here's our last issue. I did a silkscreen cover homage to Picasso. That's from 95, I think. And so, as a sidebar, throughout that time, I was also working. I volunteered to help out with this punk fanzine coming out of Denver called Der Modern Times.
Huh.
And that was this guy. It was the guitarist Michael Moore. He had a band called the Soul Merchants, and he was putting out this free punk zine. And I joined in and helped with the covers and interior art, some of the art direction and stuff. But Michael's thing was that his parents owned a map printing company, and so he'd go in there on the week. He ran the presses. That was his day job, and he'd go in there on the weekends and just get really stoned and just start throwing together the zine.
Wow.
And one time, it was down the street from where we had our Acme meeting. So there was one occasion when he was under a lot of deadline pressure. So I got all the Acme cartoonists to walk over to the map place and help collate and pull the book together, pull the zine together. But so those were fun times.
Wow.
Yeah, this is some of my work that I randomly opened to. And then when Der Modern Times ended, the main writer for this started her own. It's Roxana Alde. She started this one called Nada. So I got the cover of that. 1985. And I had in there, I was running my Cliff Notes Illustrated series. And so that, we were doing the Acme stuff, and through that started to branch out into other things. So here's the final issue of Steel Pulse. This is the one nobody ever saw. You can probably still find the first issue in a dollar bin somewhere. because it came out at the same time as the black and white explosion, with the
Mhm.
popularity of the Ninja Turtles. And but this is the one. By the time I'd done the fourth one, I started to figure out how to make comics and understand what I was doing. So I'm not entirely ashamed of everything in here, but
Oh, lots of interesting formal things going on. What is that,
right,
about
right. I'm sorry.
1985 or so? Is that about
This issue
1986, 87?
started around 87 or something, 80, 86. So this one is 89, the final issue. I was going to put them out monthly and ended up taking at least a year every issue. It takes more than you expect, right?
Yeah.
And then, and this one took like an extra couple of years. I think it was longer. It was the big conclusion to the drama. But there was that, and also we were putting up. Bob had asked me to do a mini comic, and I told him no. But I mean, the thing about me is like someone says, "Can you try this?" And I'm like, "Oh no, that's not my thing. I'm into this other thing." And then I walk away and say, "Oh, but if I did, what would I do?" And so shortly after refusing to work on a mini comic, I found myself irresistibly drawn to, and
Oh,
but these were published. This was published through the Acme Group. We tried making a little subgroup called Thumbprint Cards and Comics, and we would turn the back of the mini comic into a postcard form
hmm.
and make these little booklets that people could buy and mail out.
Wait, is that a single sheet or is that a folded zine? Oh, look at that.
Little comic. It's on nice paper. I think we were using like the cutoff sections of the exercise sheets when we were publishing one of our other booklets. We take the parts of the paper that would have to be trimmed off and make a second little comic out.
Wow. Wait, so you had a printing, you've mentioned so many different types of printing presses and people.
Right, right. Getting commercial printing done for things like the later Acme issues.
So, but on the side, you would have these postcards printed. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, on the literal margins of one of
Yeah,
the. Yeah, gotcha.
I think if I remember correctly, it was kind of my smarter friends were involved with getting that stuff to work. Because by then we had, quite a number of the artists were graphic designers and professionals and stuff.
Hmm.
And okay, so it's through all of that, around that, during that period, uh, I I remember like pitching this to Dennis and talking him into it. That I talked Dennis into creating this catalog to distribute mini comics, and we called it Fandom House. And it was basically Dennis's baby. I mean, he took over because again, he was the organizational guy, and so he would be the one who'd do this like curated mini comic catalog, and he'd run the people would mail in submissions. He'd run them by me, and we'd fight over what we were going to accept or reject. And he always knew that I was going to like. We had a big fight about Mike Diana. I remember, because as I recall, I think Dennis showed them to me knowing that I was going to want him to include them, and knowing that he was going to refuse.
So Mike Diana famous for Boiled Angel, which was
Yep.
explain.
Yeah. We had. Yeah, he was sending us those, and I was like, this is edgy and cool and interesting. And Dennis is like, no way am I stocking that sort of stuff in there.
So
But,
tell us more about how you would accept accept submissions to this. How many would you run in a catalog, and how many would you stock, and how would you accept them?
those are good questions for Dennis. If you ever want to try and get, of course, he's
Sure.
such a grumpy guy. He probably would do nothing but complain, and primarily about me. But can see that you'd connect with these other publishers and stock their work. He'd probably buy a reasonable number, as many as he thought he could sell. Probably 10 or 20, and then order more. And then over the years, we put out several. So you can see, like, here's a 1998 catalog. It's a trifold sheet, right? and we would prioritize our own work, but
Mhm.
include a lot of other stuff. And Ken, will you indulge me? Like if we go through, this is the 1995 one. Uh,
Certainly.
can we just page through it and look at a few of the publishers that are in here? Because
Totally.
some of them I think are important.
Yeah. My main concern at the moment is I'm wondering, like, is Zoom recording the correct screen? I hope so. If not, I'm taking screenshots, so we'll see how it goes. But certainly,
Yeah, let's hope. We have it spotlit, right?
yeah,
So it should be.
I
Oh,
think so.
good. Okay, so you can see at the beginning, like here's a thing on submissions. Uh, nice big index. So it got to be kind of big, right at the end, right before he just quit altogether. Right around that 95, Dennis kicked us all out of his living room. Said, "I'm done. Get out of here." So, and who can blame him? I really sort of broke that guy into doing a lot of work. So here we see the Fantasy Press stuff. Sputnik is Scott Johnson. Joel Orff, if you know Joel,
Oh, yeah.
included. But to hear Howsky Studios, do you know about them?
No,
Was that a yes or a no? I couldn't hear you.
no,
Okay, so check this out because they were again, Willis, Fiesel, Howarth are also very important to me. Um, so here's a Howsky Studios catalog.
Oh, it's Matt
I
Howard.
remember spending like $80 in the early, that'd probably be the equivalent of about $400 now. I don't know, just buying a bunch of stuff. Matt Howarth was this
Yeah.
passionate artist. He went on to do a lot of comics
The
in the
Annoying Post Brothers.
yeah, the Post Brothers. But before he was doing the Post Brothers comics, he was doing these other. I mean, these are essentially early Post Brothers comics. Like here's one that is made to look like a matchbook. Um, so he's playing around with formats in all these interesting ways. And this stuff is really edgy and dangerous. The Post Brothers are these murderous musicians who can travel at will from one reality to another, and he involved this character here, I believe, is the actual um, electronic musician Conrad Schnitzler. It's like guest starring, and Howarth did the comics for the Residents, but
Yeah.
one of the things that was really intriguing was that instead of doing comics, a lot of the time he did these series that he called his picture sleeves from Bugtown. And so what
Uh,
you get is that this is a fake record cover with a fake cardboard record tucked into it. And then on the back, you can read the song titles and the instrumentation and the credits. And basically the story, it's like storytelling through implication. You read through a lot of these and it implies a world and a story and all this stuff, but it's not, strictly comics.
yeah.
And I have a bunch of these. They're just wonderful.
It's
Um,
1979, I think I saw. Wow.
yeah. It started in the '70s and went on. I think he was publishing his stories through the '90s. Here's his uh, on the back of the catalog, Residence Comics. Mark of the Mall comics and stuff. So Howarth,
Was Howsky only Matt Howarth?
yeah. Well, I mean, and some of his friends. I mean, there were other artists involved, but it was primarily him. He seemed like one of those um, irrepressible, nonstop artists who just like works all the time. You saw this stippling and stuff. Amazing. But here we can see some of these people I don't even remember, but it's Ace Backwards. Um, Now, this is another one that I wanted to call out. No joke, the Raised by Wolves series. And this artist, I think, like here's a couple examples of Raised by Wolves and True Tales Too Terrible to Tell. He's anonymous. I don't know who the artist was,
What?
but he was writing comics, and they're good too. But he was writing these comics as part of his recovering repressed memories of child abuse, of sexual abuse.
Oh, oh my gosh.
And so these are really they're powerful and raw and painful to read. and then towards the end, he starts going off the deep end. He's like getting going under hypnosis and stuff. And so some of the later ones are about being his parents being Satanists, and but it's like it starts to become unbelievable. But I think in the early issues, he's actually even confronting some of his abusers, and get him to admit. So it's like there's that strange mixture of repressed memory and fantasy, the inability to know for sure what's happening. You can see poetry and drawings and comics, and really remarkable work.
And there's no evidence even today of who made these comics?
I don't. There may be. Maybe he's come out in public. I don't know. I'm telling you what the little that I know, which is we were selling these because they were intensely impactful and
So
important.
you were selling those in the catalog, so they came in the mail from somewhere at the very
Yeah,
least.
and I think Dennis probably had a pretty good idea who he was dealing with, but I don't.
Wow.
I'm afraid to say. So that's one worth noting. Some of these others, I'm sure, are great, and I don't quite recall. Bruce Crislip did this Outside In. I just had my hands on it, rummaging around. Outside In was a mini comic of self-portraits of cartoonists.
Right.
And so this is an issue where the Acme crowd did self-portraits, except this is a drawing of Dennis Pimple by Richard Florence, because Dennis wasn't an artist. But here's my fake self-portrait. I didn't want to do a real self-portrait, so I created a character. I still use him on my website and stuff. And then here's okay, so here's Phil Norman. Here's Harry Lyrico.
Harry Lyrical doesn't look homeless there.
Well, he cleaned himself up okay. He'd show up at the art gallery with a jacket and a tie and stuff. So, hung around the art galleries a lot. Sometimes people would put him up somewhere, find a space for him. But sometimes he had one comic called Winter Home. There was a drawing of an abandoned train car that he wintered in.
Wow.
Harry is no longer with us. He a few years ago in Albuquerque was killed in a hit and run. And, none of his friends knows really what happened.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, so that's Outside In. Yeah, I was looking at Zigzag today. Let's see, did I skip a pages? So here's another one that we have to talk about. Jabberwocky Graphics. You know them? Brad Foster? Okay, so so Foster is another of the ones that I met. In 1988, Dennis and his wife Denise and I drove to Chicago, where Norm Dwyer and his wife Shelley had resettled, and we went to the Comic Con there, the one that would morph into Wizard World. And it was at that I was able to meet a few of the people that I'd corresponded with, cartoonists I admired, Matt Fizel, Brad Foster, and Paul Curtis. I don't know if you know. Do you know who Paul Curtis was?
Paul Curtis is not familiar to me.
Okay. I've got his stuff here. So, here we go. I think we'll come to him in a minute. Anyway, I'm just bringing up this anecdote that they all knew my work a little, but didn't know me, and they all reacted to me. All three, I met each of the three in different times, and they all had the same exact reaction to meeting me. They said, "You're T. Motley, but you look normal." I'm proud of that. Anyway, Brad Foster did all these comics. He did this mini comic anthology called Stuff.
Right. A lot of stippling on that too.
Oh man, he's a stippling machine. Him and Howard. They're people who just, if you meet him, he talks real fast. You can't settle down. hyperactive. This is work by different people. And here's one of his that I like a lot. Excuse me, called Personal Possessions. He was going through and drawing everything in his apartment and his with his rapidograph and his
Hmm.
stippling. But then in the middle of doing that, somebody broke into his home and stole a bunch of stuff. And so he had to X out all the things that he no longer owned when he published it. So
Oh,
it's like
wow.
most of the items have X's over them.
That's hilarious.
It's cool, right? And there's his major tool, his rapidograph pen.
No.
Uh, you gotta love this stuff. But he was doing these jams, and so okay, here this is. I think you're gonna find this quite interesting. So here's one, a jam he did, Amused to Know Him. This is a jam with Steve Willis, Foster and Willis, and so a lot of people, back in the day, people were trading work in the mail and sending pages back and forth and adding to them. And these things would take however long they take. But you get these wonderful, entertaining comics this way, right?
Mhm.
And, so here's another one. This is a jam between it's Edward Bullman and Wayno. Do we know Wayno? He works with Dan Ferraro on Bizarro strip.
Does Wayno work with Dan Peraro, really?
Yeah, on Bizarro. Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's hilarious. Um,
Here he is with Ted Bowman doing a rhyming, alphabet rhyme jam comic.
yeah, I remember this comic.
You
Uh,
remember it?
yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So, do you know about this one? Our story thus far.
No.
Okay, because this was a jam comic inaugurated and published by Brad Foster, in which each of the contributors would like here's page one. Each of the contributors would draw a full page, and it circulated in the mail, and bunches and bunches of cartoonists participated in this early comic jam. So you can see Brad Foster, Jim Ryan, David Miller, Par Holman, like that. We see Rick Geary, Trina Robbins, um,
Yeah,
Jim
Iron.
Sergey, and then issue two here. I think there were three. I contributed a page to issue four, but it never got done and never came out. I believe my page followed Peter Baggs.
Hmm.
But here, look at this. This is issue two. You can see contributions from Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, who are unknown wannabe cartoonists at the
What
time.
year is it?
And Steve Willis. This is 1985.
Oh, about to Matt Wagner.
Chester Brown, page
Huh.
50. Matt Wagner, page 46. Yeah.
Layla Dowling. A lot of Eclipse artists were in here.
Matt Smith. Yeah, Valentino is page one, right?
Mhm.
Here. Um, so yeah, and it's this forgotten gem, I think. You know, kind of amazingly cool. I've been developing these theories that have been finding their way into my work about how comic jams have tropes.
Uh-huh.
If you let a bunch of people work on the same story, you see the same recurring things. Like
Um,
somebody will be a chaos agent who tries to just take the storyline and just throw it out, throw a wrench in the works and make it all insane, right? And then a few pages later, you'll get one of those control freaks who wants to come in and write an elaborate explanation that ties it all together and makes sense out of everything. And then you
is that,
get some
go ahead.
people will be like irritated with a character somebody created, and so they'll abruptly kill them off. And I believe as we run through this story, I see Steve Willis's character Morty the dog was being freely used and killed and resurrected all through the series constantly. That's part of the gags. Like, can you kill Morty? Here's Chester Brown's page,
Yep.
right? Steve Willis is Morty the dog. Is Morty dead by the end of the page? Who knows? But crazy, right?
Wow.
Where where was I? I want to. Okay, so that was Jabberwock.
Right.
Okay, I think there are a few more we need to touch on here. Uh, some of them, I think you see, Overheard at America's Lunch Counters. So Susan
Yes.
Catherine was
Oh,
doing
yeah.
interesting comics where she would just sit at a cafe and pretend to be writing a letter to her mom, but then she'd jot down all the snippets of conversation she heard, and then draw cartoons to accompany the best ones. Mars will probably be a state someday. Can't have money and spend it too. It's just, they were fun. They were cool. Uh, Keep going. That's my stuff. And then here's the guy who introduced you and me.
True. Matt Madden.
And he's doing this 5 o'clock shadow comics. Yeah, I met Matt because he was traveling through town and stayed with Dennis, but Dennis had to go on a trip and couldn't put him up for the last night. So he called me up and told me that I needed to let Matt and his girlfriend Helen sleep on my couch. And
What year is that?
probably 90.
That's right on the front.
This comic is 1990. The year I met Matt might have been right about that time too. But you can see there's a Fazelle page.
Wait, this is an anthology.
Yeah, 5 o'clock shadow
Was Matt in Michigan at that time?
Yes,
Gotcha.
and I trust you're probably going to interview it soon.
Yeah.
So you can get a fuller story about his side of the world. But,
right.
We were everybody's friends through the mail. Back then. So here we see a meal to trois from the entrance. So here's another one we should probably point out. Gavin McInnes. I was during lockdown. I was like finally organizing my mini comic collection and filing them, and making little tags so I could find them again. I was making one for Gavin McInnes and asking myself, I wonder whatever happened to that guy. Without putting it together until later when I was reading a feature on him. So this is Gavin McInnes's Pervert Comics.
Pervert Comics.
He's a pretty good cartoonist, actually. They're kind of raunchy sex and drugs and not overtly political. He's collaborating. This is a cover by Dave Cooper.
Oh.
So he's collaborating with other cartoonists and doing these pervert comics. And anyway, we all know McInnes nowadays as the guy who was the founder of the Proud Boys.
What? The Proud Boys?
Yeah.
Wait. The the Proud Boys are the ones who, well, first of all, they're very right wing, but they also, why don't you tell us who, I can't keep my right wing wackos straight. Tell us who
I'm gonna get it wrong too.
Okay, well,
here's an attempt. Yeah, McInnes created this group called the Proud Boys. As far as I know, initially the thing they were proud of was supposed to be that they were refraining from masturbating.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
In order to increase their testosterone levels or something to channel into their street brawls that they're famous for.
Street brawls.
Street brawls. Yeah, they would be doing protests, interrupting protests and getting in fist fights with left-wing people and stuff like that.
Well, not masturbating would be a precursor to their disruptive behavior at left-wing.
That's my understanding. Again, I'm not pretending to get it. Somebody can step in and correct us. But yeah, and then when the brawls started getting out of hand and it was getting a lot of bad press, McInnes stepped down and quit the group, and then it was taken over by Enrique Tarrio, who's in prison now for for the Proud Boys role in the January 6th.
How easily could we open a pervert comic right now and find a masturbation scene? Probably pretty easily, huh?
Something that might not play on YouTube. Yeah, we could.
I don't know what YouTube's restrictions are, to be honest. But
Sex, here, Sex in the 90s.
Oh dear. Uh-huh. And where is this coming out of? Where is this guy located at the time?
I think Vancouver. He's Canadian.
Oh, oh, okay, interesting. And
No,
wait, so
Montreal. I think Montreal. Sorry, Montreal.
and so
My understanding of the story is that he was the staff cartoonist. Here's a nice sex page of of a local newspaper in Montreal called the Voice of Montreal. And then at some point they simplified it and expanded, and they knocked the O out of it, and they changed from Voice to Vice, and they became Vice Media. And McInnes was one of the founders of Vice Media, and eventually, I guess, had a falling out with the other founders because he was getting, more right wing and extreme or something.
huh.
And then went off on his own and ultimately created the Proud Boys.
Wow, this is a really interesting not a wrinkle, some sort of what's the right metaphor for a web of
A weird
connection.
blind alley that this comics history is taking us down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow.
I stumbled across his Twitter the other day. So he's still around. Um,
Not making comics, I'm going to
Not
presume.
making comics.
Please.
Maybe. I kind of wish he'd stuck to this. But
And
so there's
and we
stories.
said that was late, what are we, late 80s still?
Let's see. Yeah, I think we're in the 90s at this point, early 90s. So let's find it. Let's find a date on one of these issues. My eyesight's Sex in the 90s. It's the title.
Oh, true, right.
But
It also
can
said
I,
in that
yeah,
introduction, it also said he finished that issue in Taiwan. Was he quite the world traveler?
I don't know. Maybe you want to have him on sometime? Ask him.
Hmm.
Think it over. Um, Looking for a year and not 94. Here's a jam he did with Dave Cooper, Gavin McInnes and Dave Cooper,
Huh.
1994.
Mhm. Interesting. Okay.
Okay, so that's
Thanks for this digression. Not even a digression at all. Thanks for this
or isn't it?
insight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so here's a whole big section devoted to Steve Willis, but then Robert Lewis's Lunacy comic is worth mentioning. Starhead Comics, again, that's Michael Dowers publishing. And he's somebody you should get. And then here's somebody you did get, David Lasky.
Hmm.
Where you talked to him. Um, Colin Upton was in here, and Gary Fields.
Oh,
These
yeah,
are all these are all names of people you might try doing future interviews with.
for sure.
Look, that one's sold out. Dishman, that was a pretty good comic. Here's Jacques Boivin, Mark Frauenfelder. He was one of the early Hector members, quite early on, but he's famous because he was publishing a zine called Boing Boing, that then he brought online and became a major
That's
website.
that's the same Boing Boing, huh?
That's
Hmm.
the same Boing Boing, yeah. Frauenfelder. I met him on one occasion. He was like a hard guy to pin down.
Wait, did you say he was one of the Hector people?
Yeah, early on, but he also quit early.
Oh,
So yeah, he was at one of our Hector meetings. And the Everyman Studios. Again, that's the Colorado Springs people. But Fizel's not available. Quimby.
I always like the name not available, but it's far funnier seeing it inside a catalog, a big not available.
Yeah. Then you could get Dennis would send the catalogs from all the other people to anybody who wanted one.
Hmm.
We were just spreading the love, and then you see like a duplex plant recommended reading Duplex Planet, Snicker, Nancy's Magazine, Twisted Image. Here's a Nancy's magazine that I had. It's like an envelope full of all these little awesome little booklets.
Hmm. I've heard about Nancy's magazine. What is it exactly? It's coming out of Columbus, it looks like.
Yeah, it sure does. And it's 1990. And yeah, it's just groovy, self-published zine with
Is it an anthology of other artists inside of that
yeah.
envelope? Mhm.
And it's not not strictly comics. Of course, it's text and image and writing formats. Love this stuff. It's so much great work. Okay. Oh, a couple more. Yeah, I did mention Paul Curtis, who also passed away recently.
Hmm.
Paul was the brother of Maggie Thompson, the publisher of Comics Buyer's Guide, and his thing was publishing micro comics. So you'd have these little envelopes. This is one by Louisa Felix, cartoonist, and Louisa, she was in ill health. She was a victim of Hurricane Sandy.
A victim?
Yeah, when Hurricane Sandy knocked all the power out in Hoboken, where she was living, she was unwell and trapped in her home and died in her apartment.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, but these are get this little envelope. I don't want to open this one because it's fresh, but you have these
Hmm.
little soup extra folded tiny comics in here.
Hmm.
And
I'd be interested in finding out more first.
yeah, and yeah, a couple more things before I am willing to shout out. Um, so others that deserve attention. This is Rick Bradford's Poop Sheet, and we mentioned Steve Willis was publishing a zine called City Limits Gazette that was typewritten. It was just it was like the fact sheet 5 for mini comic people. I
Yeah.
couldn't get my hands on one of those, but then that evolved and changed its name over the years to White Buffalo Gazette. And then Willis stopped doing it, and other people took it over. I think Chris Chrislip might have done it for a while, and then um, Buzz Bazizik took it over. We'll talk about him in a second. But Rick Bradford was doing this one called Poop Sheet, self-published comics and other good stuff. And so it's reviews
Hmm.
and yeah, comics and reviews and
And,
contact information.
and
Look,
ads, it looks like.
ads. I'm looking for a year on this. I'm not finding one right away. I think this is from the 80s. Letters,
Chicago Comic Con report 1994.
94. Okay. Here's a column by Wayno over here. Uh, like that. And Bradford is still running things on Facebook. He's got a Poop Sheet Facebook page, and a
I
lot of
just discovered.
these old cartoonists connect there. Do you ever
Yeah.
Fred out of Texas? Good guy. And then um, Buzz Bazizik, like I said, took over the White Buffalo Gazette. So here's an issue from 2012,
Hmm.
2013. And this is just it became mostly like comics and news and reviews from all the people in the network. One of the people you'll find in here regularly is John Porcellino.
Hmm. Right.
There's a Delane My Somal Diary. She's someone, if you move into the 2000s, talk to Delane. With Bowman, all the usual suspects. Chad Woody, Jim Sirgi is probably someone worth
Hmm.
touching on. But Bazizik, before he changed it, there's like one of his mini comics recently. But before he changed to Buzz Bazizik, his first name was Maximum Traffic,
Ah.
and that's how he used to be known. And he was doing these psychedelic images that were all made by playing with Xeroxes. Like he'd draw a mark on the paper and run off, 100 copies, then cut and paste them into these patterns, and then do it again and again and get all these different crazy patterns. But this is he told me that making this perfect bound book anthology was the thing that ultimately killed maximum traffic. He stopped after this. But this is this anthology, Did Truth Be Known? It's got work by, again, Willis and a whole bunch of others. Yeah, here's some of the, oh, this is Neo Psychedelic Man. Yeah, that's somebody else, but you can find a lot of maximum traffic. Yeah, this is maximum traffic right here. You can see the kinds of crazy, cool
Wow.
patterns he was making.
And that's largely a combination of drawing and photocopy
yeah,
pattern.
yeah. It's like what can you do with a photocopier that nobody's tried before?
Oh.
Right. Just very amazing. There's more.
Mm-hmm.
And it's yeah, it's just making multiple copies and moving them around and then copying them again. And turns out there's a lot you can do. There's more Willis. Um, he's also played with ceramics. He sends me these ceramic coins to just give away. He just gives them away, drop them places. Two-sided, so you have a little slogan, uh, "Eat the rich." This one on one side it says "love," and on the other side it's the King logo. uh, that's good. And then he'll mail stuff a lot. Again, we still work in the mail. People still do. So here's one that he and I did where we were just mailing back and forth his series Damn Weird. So this is Damn Weird number 23. But,
When's this from?
this is not that long ago. This is can I find a year? I don't know. It's probably 10, 15 years ago. I'm not sure.
So where is Buzz Berserky?
Buzz Bazzic, uh, from Pennsylvania. Last I heard, he was living with his um, in-laws in Florida, so I don't know where he is right now. Hope he's well. He's wonderful, wonderful man. Great person to know. And it was here's maybe one last thing we could talk about as segues. Toward the end of the 80s, making my first long form comic and stuff, I started to feel the urge to become a teacher. And so I found a place in town, the Colorado Free University, where I could teach classes. And a lot of the people who went on to like become my friends at Hector. Oh, I forgot to mention Squidworks. A lot of my friends started out as students, taking that little class. And there's a little mini comic I used to do. So yeah, it was around 1995. Oh, yeah, I keep finding others that deserve mention would be the Fast Fiction Group out of England.
Sure.
They were in there. I must have paged by and not seen them, but that was mainly the work of this man, Ed Pinsent, who again, you see Glenn Dakin, Phil Elliott, Eddie Campbell was connected to them. All this talent, right? But for me, the best of the best was this guy, the one nobody remembers.
Yeah.
Ed Pinsent. Here's one of his great comics from 1988.
Yeah, his comics were really
they're just excellent. So in my classes, I have slideshows that have all these forgotten cartoonists in them, and they've connected to this anthology, this Escape magazine. So yeah, I started teaching, and a lot of my friends went on to become a cartoonist. This is a handout I would give to accompany the lessons, mini comic version of the lesson, very Fizell influenced, and then around 95, Dennis kicked us out, and so we renamed ourselves. We changed our name from Acme Comics, but largely out of deference to Chris Ware, who had come along and was doing Acme
novelty.
Library, and it was so much better than anything we could do. And so we just said, well, we're going to change our name. So we became the Squidworks. And so here's we started meeting at a little arts place or at a cafe. We moved around because we didn't have a home anymore, and we just it was self-publishing. Everybody would do their own mini comics. We stopped doing anthologies, and we just jammed them.
Wait, this is a catalog, this menu
This is a catalog, yeah,
of work only by the
by the
Squid
members of the
group?
Squidworks.
Wow.
Yeah, 1990s. Here's a later one, 2002. And I think I don't know if they still meet. These monthly meetings may have been killed by COVID.
Mm.
There's a page of my stuff. Um, and we also would do art shows at a cafe in Denver called Pablo's Coffee Extravaganza. So we do this Pablo's Comics Extravaganza. That was Jeff Powers, who owned a comic store. Well, actually, it started out as a barista. He had been one of my students. Gathered us and got us all of this art show. And there's one of our jam issues we did. We put out a booklet to go with each show. And this one has a lot of the constraints. Remember Shuffleupagus? It was Jesse Reclaw. It was a game rules for a comic jam. I think we've got it here a game of let's see. Yeah, we did a few rounds of 5-card Nancy.
Nice.
But these were using we at the time it was hard to find good enough Nancy material, so we ended up using the Nancy tryout strips that Ivan Brunetti drew when he tried to get the strip and didn't. But these ran in Rocktober, Jake Austin's music scene. So these are Ivan Brunetti Nancy's panels. And I sent them to Brunetti. He sent me back a nice letter thanking me. He liked them.
Oh, that's hilarious.
We found that one addition to the normal 5-card Nancy rules was that at the end you vote and agree if you made a proper strip, right? We figured out one more thing you need to do, and that's title it. So this one here you see we see a ball bouncing and she's all bloody, and then at the end another ball bouncing, and we titled it The Castrator's Apprentice. And then Brunetti said that was his favorite. So there's that. Here's my friend Al, Al Newman is another homeless cartoonist who passed away in the late 2000s, 2006 or so. And he was a guy who had been an abstract expressionist painter in the New York scene in the late 50s, early 60s, and then traveled all around and did sand painting and all these things. And then finally, late in life, settled on comics and was doing these abstract. He would do a doodle and then another doodle and then let them progressively morph each other. Influences. Then he went on to do narrative stuff later on, but he once told me, like when he was doing one of his story comics later, he told me that all those years of being a musician and he played with writing screenplays and painted and all these things he tried, he said he never worked so hard in his life as when he was trying to make a comic. So that was the most difficult challenge of them all. So okay, so then a couple more things maybe. I went on to jamming Hector, started making these mini comics, but over the years in the 90s, I ended up collaborating quite a bit with this European artist, a Dutch cartoonist named, his name is Mark Van Elberg, but he went by the moniker Monobrain.
Monobrain.
Yeah, and his stuff is really wild. And so this is a publication you did called Terra Incognita. I'm not quite sure how this was printed, but the outside image here, the border is by Monobrain, and the inside image is by this an Italian cartoonist named Claudio Parentala. And then the whole thing is like an anthology of Monobrain and other cartoonists, but it's all this interesting color So again, I'm showing you some of my treasures. That's
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
collect. It's Parentala, Marcel Reachers. This is the the expressionist underground European comic scene. And I collaborated with Monobrain over there. I'd send him some of my weirdest drawings, and then he'd tear them to pieces, glue the fragments down on another piece of paper, and then continue the drawings and finish the drawings.
Oh,
Send them back. And they were amazing. Here, this is this jam I did. It has a lot of these people, but Mono Brain is in here too. Let's see if I can find it. Here we go.
hmm.
So here's a Mono Brain comic, and here's one that's I collaged some of his drawings and drew around them and stuff, kind of in his manner.
Oh, wow.
All right, so that's my.
Amazing.
I think I said what I wanted to say.
Oh, gosh. Well, thanks. Oh my God. There's so much there. I can't even get my brain around it. I took
Right,
like
right. It's a lot of stuff, right? Comics.
6 pages of notes here, but maybe I'll go back to spotlighting you if
Sure.
yeah, let's see, replace spotlight. Hopefully Zoom did that correctly. I hope. Wow. Um, so maybe I could ask you a couple of follow-up questions. Like what you just explained to me is like there was this huge scene in Denver that I really didn't know about. And there's probably huge scenes in a lot of cities that people
Yeah,
maybe don't know about that aren't like the big coastal ones, maybe like, San Fran or New York or something.
that's right. Yeah.
Wow.
Um, yeah, anytime there's comic fans everywhere, right? And you start getting them together, and people are like, I know what, let's put on a show, let's make a thing, right? And yeah, I was motivated to try and gather people for these monthly group critiques.
Uh-huh.
Because it's part of this like the incipient teacher in me. It took a while for me to like figure out that I'm happier teaching cartooning than I'm drawing cartoons, frankly.
Right.
I just find that the medium is so interesting, and the nuts and bolts of how it works, all that. But yeah, so we were doing group critiques of our work on a monthly basis. And I feel like back then, my bedside manner wasn't what it is now, and I probably hurt a lot of feelings.
In the critiques of your
Yeah,
people.
yeah, I was known for being like savage, and yeah, and so there's probably a lot of people who just spit when they hear my name. And I hope I deserve that.
Okay.
I remember one incident where, toward the end, a couple of young cartoonists, I can't remember one of them, but one of them was Zach Hennessy, who went on to do a lot of interesting comics too. But they brought their, action adventure multi-page narrative they were working on, and showed it to the group, and I looked at it. I was like, oh, cool, all right, carry on. And then they went and like sat on the couch for a while, and then came back all like downtrodden. And it's like, no, no, you don't understand. We wanted one of your critiques. And so I had to sit down and page through and like pick apart all the little problems and just like I tend to do in my storytelling classes now. But it's like they showed up for that. They wanted that. A lot of people
And
I
what
know
that's
didn't want that and weren't ready for it.
and that's 90s sometime? What's
Yeah,
what's
that would have been the early 90s.
early 90s? And uh and sorry, what was the name of that artist?
Zach Hennessy.
Okay. Oh, really funny. And so he went on to make more comics.
Yeah, he did. And I believe, after I left Denver, I think he created a little art school for a while called Dead Academy.
Yeah.
Denver something arts. I don't know. So it was an acronym that involved Denver, but made the word dead. I don't know too much about it. Zach's a good guy.
Interesting. Wow. Okay. Well, we did this totally in a unique order. You just basically gave us such an array, such a walkthrough of one particular facet of the mini comics world back then. It's great. Thank you. The one thing I'm looking to sort of document and discover is just how many worlds like that there were, you know? This is the
I imagine you start turning over some rocks, you're gonna find them everywhere.
yeah, yeah. And you know, we do ask the question normally at the end. We say, what do you miss about that time pre-internet, and what don't you miss about that time? Would you give us answers to that?
Yeah, I don't know if I might regret my answer. Uh, I'm not sure. Things have changed, and depending on your mood, did they change for the better or the worse? Is this good? Is it bad? Uh, Back then, it seems to me, as a young artist in the '80s, comics were, um, you know, generally just regarded as trash, right? As you know, idiotic and stupid. And so I'm from this whole generation. I think you are too. You're like a decade younger than me, but it was still going where we were the people who were reading comics and noticing these are marvelous.
Mm.
There's so much you can do. There's so much you can say in a comic that maybe you can't say in a painting or a poem or a novel or a movie. Right. And there are special effects unique to comics. It's like such a exciting and interesting medium. It invites all these styles and all these approaches and kinds of taste, and it's so limitless, right? That how is it that can everybody be so dismissive?
Uh-huh.
It's just the injustice of it. I think was a thing that struck us, right?
Mm.
And so that was a motivating thing that as a young cartoonist, I had something to prove. And,
Mm.
and so here it is all these years later. The way I formulated it around, I think, 2005 or something was like, the war is over, the good guys won, without me ever managing to fire a single shot. That's how it felt. And, and you look at comics now, you go to Mocha or Comic Arts Brooklyn, or here in New York, we have these awesome conventions, SBX, any of the major cons. What you see is thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of brilliant young artists making beautiful work their own way, and all these different, and it just goes on forever. You walk into like walking into Comic Arts Brooklyn is like the scene at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark where they're pulling the camera back, you know, and it's like the tables go on forever as far as the eye can see, and if you walk up to any one of them, the work is brilliant.
Mm.
You know, and
Mhm.
it's like this is probably the golden age of comics right now.
Mm.
So much great work coming out, and there's no way to keep track of it all. It's really hard to stand out in such a marvelous crowd, But um, anyway, the case has been well made that comics
Mhm.
have these wonders that they can achieve, and they're so welcoming. Anybody can step in and join. Feels like comics are more at this point more something you do than something you read. They're
Mm.
probably more fun to make than to read. So so am I sad that things got this good? Yeah, maybe. It was kind of cool when there weren't that many people trying to make this case.
Mhm.
We could kind of all, you see, we're forming a catalog and getting to know all the people around, and it wasn't exhaustive, but it was a pretty thorough, look in looking at Dennis's catalog of like what was going on in the comic scene, the self-publishers in the '80s and '90s, right? You try to do that now, you couldn't. You know,
Yeah.
Fact Sheet 5 would go on forever. I mean, there's still people making catalogs like that, but they're all going to be fragmentary, marginal like that necessarily. So I don't know. Was that anything like an answer to your question?
Yeah, it's a great answer, and it's a very hopeful and I think open-hearted one too. You're very positive about the work being done now, and you're not reflecting in a bitter way, which is potential for people that we've been interviewing, like the good old days are over. It's not, So I like that you are so impressed by the bounty of what's out there now, and you're right.
Right.
Yeah. Well, God, Motley, thank you so much. Probably could do this again with a total, pick a different catalog and just walk through it or something. But
Reach out to some of these folks I highlighted.
definitely, and that's usually one of our final questions. This is like, give us 3 names of people we should locate, but you gave me about 30. So so we'll go from there. I appreciate it. So I'll sign off. I'll say thank you. Stay on for 1 second after, if you don't mind.
Okay,
Thanks,
well, thank
everybody.
you so much, Tom. I appreciate being listened to.
Appreciate it. All right, I'm gonna hit stop.
Thanks for listening. This is the 80s, 90s pre-internet mini comics oral history archives. This is a project of the Sequential Artists Workshop, or SAW. You can find out more about this project or about the courses we offer, the programs we offer in comics and visual literacy and graphic novels at sawcomics.org. That's SAWCOMICS.org. You can find out how to support this project through the donate button. You can also support us on Patreon at Saw Comics. You can find more of this on our YouTube channel or through various places where you get your podcasts. You can find archives of this at the University of Florida and at our other partner institutions. And waving at you from the past, this is Tom Hart, the director of the Sequential Artists Workshop. Thanks so much for listening.